Great. So yeah, my name is Chris. Thanks for having me here today. I know it's towards the end of the day and towards the end of the conference, so I appreciate your attention during this one of these final talks. Um, yeah, just a quick introduction. Um, I am a product manager on the design systems team at the Wikimedia Foundation. I've been here for just coming up on a year. I started in at the beginning of January of this year. And I am based in Toronto, so I know it's getting late in the day there, but my day is just getting started. I'm here to do a really quick talk about Codex, which is the design system that the Wikimedia Foundation has been developing. I guess you could say for the past 2 years, but more seriously within the past year and a half. Um, and yeah, this is just a really quick talk. You might have specific questions, and I'll talk about like how you can get those questions answered and maybe who the right person is to answer it. We have some really talented designers and engineers on the team that might be able to answer very specific technical questions, but I'll try to field whatever I can here as well. So yes, we're talking about design systems. What is a design system? So there's a definition here on the screen. That it's a collection of reusable elements. I think a lot of people typically think of maybe parts of what make up a whole design system, so like a UI library or a framework or a style guide. What we're talking about here is really a comprehensive design system. And I'd say Codex is the first comprehensive design system that we've tried to implement in Wikipedia. And we'll get to some legacy tools and libraries that have been developed in the past, but yeah, this is really about a cohesive and consistent system that can be used in a wide variety of use cases. Something that's not on the slide that I think it makes sense to talk about is who the design system is for. And really, it's for anyone building user experiences within the movement, whether your background is in design or you're a developer or even a product manager or someone just trying to build an extension or a gadget. You are part of the audience for a design system. And just really quickly to talk about examples of design systems that you might be already familiar with. Material design from Google is a good example of this, or Shopify Polaris or IBM Carbon. These are all design systems. These ones happen to be public and open source design systems. I'm not sure about IBM's actually, but yeah, these are all available for public use, and Codex is as well. So let's get into why we're even investing in a design system. One of the key things is reducing user frustration through increased consistency. So this is just for the end user experience of interacting with the software. They have a consistent user and design experience no matter what feature they're looking at or what project they're on. The goal is that they don't have to relearn anything. And it also just allows us to make faster decisions around certain UX patterns or design solutions. We've already done the work of testing these components with users and making it hopefully the best possible UX to solve that problem. And this frees up teams or individuals to focus on complex problems. So if you're building a certain feature or a certain product, you don't want to be worrying about how the buttons work or how you're going to get this, really fancy drop down to work. You want to solve on the specific use case that you're trying to achieve. So you don't have to reinvent anything if you use a design system. The other thing you get kind of for free, especially using Codex, is things like accessibility built in, support for multiple languages. All of that just already comes with the system and continues to evolve with the system. So you kind of get those benefits without really having to think about them too much. And then hopefully you only need to learn one tool, one set of guidelines, and then you can use them in multiple different places. And then, yeah, we just have some guiding principles for developing the design system. The ones I want to really focus on is the two middle ones here, actually. So Codex is designed and built for the wider MediaWiki ecosystem. So it's not designed just for MediaWiki. As much as possible, the designs and the code is being developed in a way that it's MediaWiki agnostic, but it still plays really nice with MediaWiki. And then the other thing on the collaboration side is enabling rather than enforcing. So one of the things that we're really trying to do with Codex is the design systems team is stewarding the design system, but we really want contribution and collaboration with everyone from the movement who's building user interfaces to add to the design system, to improve it, to use it. We don't want to be the ones who are, solely developing or solely controlling. So the elements of Codex, these are pretty typical components of a design system. We have a style guide that kind of underpins everything, and then we'll get into all these in detail, but we have design tokens, assets, components, and patterns. Patterns, there's an asterisk there just because we haven't actually published any patterns yet. We're still kind of debating what that looks like, but that is coming soon. So I'm not going to get into that too much in this presentation. Yeah, so we have a style guide. These are guidelines designed to support user interfaces across the projects. And they're really just a set of recommendations for designers and making design decisions. And this underpins everything else in the system. Design tokens are kind of the smallest piece of codified style decisions that we have in our system. So things like colors, and spacing. These are explicitly defined, and we've developed a nomenclature around them so that it's really easy to communicate between designers and developers when talking about these things. You don't have to talk about specific pixel value. You just need to say, we want to use color progressive in this case. And there's guidelines around this as well. Assets, pretty self-explanatory. Right now, the only asset we really provide in the library is icons, but there may be more in the future, such as illustrations. And components are really kind of the meat of the system. Is there a question in the chat? Okay. Yeah, the media system components, these are reusable. We actually provide components in View 3, CSS only, which is like style, or the styles for components to just have these components directly in HTML markup. And our focus right now has been on the web, but we're not exclusively tying ourselves to web components. We may look at native mobile expansion of Codex in the future as well. And so Codex is available obviously as a package in code, but it's also available in Figma. I'll have to check after if this link is actually publicly accessible, but it should be. So the tool we're using to design Codex is Figma, and there is an entire Figma library designed around Codex for anyone who uses Figma to be able to go in and just pull in the components. That the tokens are already built into Figma as variables. It's really, really easy to design with the system using Figma. And to actually use Codex in your projects, it's really easy. So if you're building in MediaWiki, for example, you're building an extension, then the Codex design tokens are already available for use through the MediaWiki skin variables. I would say at this point, you probably should be using Codex design tokens if you're building something new, or you might be using them already because we've migrated away from some old systems towards Codex under the hood. Same goes for icons. I think for tokens and icons, you can definitely take advantage of these, even if you're not going to be using Codex components or other parts of the system to the fullest. Using the consistent colors and spacing, those kinds of things can be taken advantage of regardless of the feature that you're building. And then components are also available in MediaWiki, both the view components and the CSS components. Obviously, like I said earlier, we're not tying ourselves explicitly to MediaWiki. So if you're working on a project outside of that, or you're building a tool, you can use Codex through NPM. We have a CDN.js. It's available in CDN.js as well, so you can kind of just easily pull it into any project. Like I mentioned before, the Figma libraries are, it says here, available to Foundation designers. I'll double check on that. At least access to the library, I think, should be public, but I'll double check. And then one thing to note, our support right now for user scripts and gadgets is limited. If you're really interested in this use case, I would say follow the task here. We're hoping to provide more of an update on this by the hackathon next May, and hopefully full support for user scripts and gadgets. You can do some things and not others, so I'm not going to get into the details of that right now. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier too, we really welcome contribution to Codex, and contribution doesn't just mean creating a new component. It could be as simple as a new token or icon. It could be a component, could be just a small update to an existing component, even if it's just a change to a small property or updating the accessibility of a component. Yeah, and we welcome changes to our documentation. That's part of the project as well. We've been working on providing really good examples of Codex usage, including a dedicated repository to like having a basic Codex app working in MediaWiki and outside of MediaWiki. Yeah, even providing design and code review, that's helpful to us. We get a lot of requests from other teams within the foundation and also from volunteer developers. Or just any feedback and general ideas that you have, that we'd consider that contribution as well, just to help improve the system. So one of the motivators for this talk was that we actually recently released Codex 1.0, which is kind of our first major milestone. We're actually, as of today, already on 1.1.1, but yeah, recently we finally bumped to our first major version. And there were a few key things that led up to this, one being bringing the style guide, which was an existing guide created by Foundation designers, and we folded that into Codex. We did an internal accessibility audit across all of the different components to make sure that they conform to WCAG 2.1 guidelines as best as possible. And we're actually going to be reaching out to the American Foundation for the Blind to do an external audit of the system. That's coming up soon. There were a number of components that were in progress that we closed out before we went 1.0, and we made sure to identify potential future breaking changes and either decide against doing them or making sure that they were done before the first major release, so that we hopefully don't end up going 2.0 tomorrow. Yeah, Codex is already being used in the wild, so I just want to share a few examples of production use cases for it. Wiki Functions, which just released general availability, is entirely using Vue and Codex in the Wiki Lambda extension that powers the new project. I chose these three examples because they're kind of different use cases. So Wiki Functions had more of a blank slate or like greenfield approach. So they were able to do everything in Vue and Codex. The growth features that the growth team at the foundation has been working on uses Codex for certain modules. So this is a good example of how you can use Vue and use Codex for specific parts of a feature without committing to it for everything, and you can kind of slowly chip away at migrating things over. So certain elements like the impact module on the mentee dashboard and the mentor dashboard are done in Codex, but then the other parts are built using different tools. And recently, a group of volunteer maintainers for the page triage extension worked with the moderator tools team at the foundation to move the new pages feed, which is a feature I think primarily used on ENWiki, that was using really old and deprecated tools, and they moved those over to Vue, and they're partially using Codex. So they're using some components, they're using some of the design tokens, but this page was really designed completely outside of the guidelines. So we think that there will be a slower transition here of using some parts and then slowly bringing in more parts of Codex as we go. I'm coming up on time, so I'll try to wrap up. This was a slide I added in last minute, but I feel like it's actually quite important. There are a number of libraries and tools out there that have been trying to solve some of the problems that we're trying to solve with Codex over the years. So I just wanted to provide a bit of an update on some of the more important ones. MediaWiki UI is a library that's been around for a while. It's currently being deprecated. When I share the slides, I'll share links in here as well. But the styles have already been moved to Codex design tokens, and the components we're moving to Codex CSS components. There will be a few exceptions here that will probably live in MediaWiki core. Wikimedia UI base variables were kind of like a precursor to Codex design tokens, so those are being swapped for Codex tokens as we speak. The design style guide, which I mentioned earlier, that is already most of the content. I think like 95% of the content has been merged into Codex. Once all of the content is moved, we'll be sunsetting the style guide as well. Wikimedia Deutschland also, around the time we started working on Codex, they built a Vue.js-based design system as well. It's called Wicket. It's a pretty robust system, but long term, it doesn't make sense to have both of these systems. So there was a decision made to fold Wicket into Codex, or really just kind of like, merge the use cases and the systems. That is just starting now. WMD is moving some of their features away from Wicket, and we'll try to use Codex as much as possible, and then Wicket will also go away. And then the big one is OUI. This is a library it's had a really long life. It underpins some of the most important and complex features like visual editor. So we're coming up with a plan for what the future of OUI looks like, the level of support that will be provided, and eventually we will transition away from it. So we'll be thinking about what a transition plan looks like and who should be looking at transitioning away from OUI to using Codex. That kind of brings me to the end. This is the design systems team. We welcome feedback. You can find us on the MediaWiki.org, on our MediaWiki.org page. And if you want to learn more about Codex, we have, I think, a really great doc site with tons of resources and tools, not just for developers, but for designers as well. And you can also visit our MediaWiki page for Codex specifically if you're interested in how to use Codex within a MediaWiki context. So that's it. I know I'm kind of running over time. If there's time for questions, I'm happy to take them now. Otherwise, please drop into our talk pages or open a fab task. And thank you.
Do we have a question? Tobias?
No. I just wanted to see if we have to wait a minute before the mic starts up.
What does that mean? I can't talk?
You can talk now, but I can.
Okay.
Just wait 1 second.
Because I do have a question. I am on with Juggle on MediaWiki 139. Can I use the newest Codex?
That's a good question. So Codex, we do independent Codex releases like of the library to NPM, and then we upstream those as part of MediaWiki versions. So if you're on 139, I have to go check, but you can either update like the version of Codex that you're using, or if you're bumping your MediaWiki version, you'll get some of those changes for free. So I can't speak to specific versions, but you should be able to pull the latest if you want to.
Okay, that's great. That would be great. Bye, Wouter.
Bye.
So I don't think we have more questions here. We do online question.
First, a personal question. I'm not a extension designer, so when I looked into Codex for the first time, what I was looking for is actually things that I could use in Wikitext, because I'm using the Chameleon skin a lot that brings the bootstrap components, and I can just say, okay, I want a div button and things like that. Is this not planned at all, or will this come maybe at a later
So I would say we don't have a plan for that right now. There's a Fabricator ticket open somewhere that I can share later about Codex being stable for use in templates and in wiki text. We know that there will be quite a few changes coming to the library that we don't want to necessarily break templates for. So we're still, we have to develop a policy around that. A good example of that right now is the MediaWiki UI button is being used in wiki text quite a bit. And that's one of the things that we want. We want to sunset MediaWiki UI, ideally replace that button with a Codex button, but that kind of will imply that there's some level of stability to the styles of components specifically, and we can't guarantee that right now. So we wouldn't commit to, I mean, you're welcome to use them, but there's a chance that the styles might change and that might affect templates or the design of your wiki text in the long run. So, yeah, I would say there isn't an explicit plan for that right now.
Okay, thank you. And there are two questions in the chat. One is from Thomas. I was aware of Codex and I'm a fan of Vue.js 3. However, is there still a risk that Vue.js will replace the default MediaWiki skin?
I don't know about replacing the skin. I would say our approach for the skin so far, we work really closely with the web team at the foundation who mostly maintains and develops the skins, and they've incorporated Codex and Vue in some places, but I wouldn't say that like the entire skin is going to move to be just like a Vue.js front-end loaded experience anytime soon, or maybe not at all. So the approach we take for certain high-profile, high-usage use cases, like loading article pages on Wikipedia, for example, that it's done in a way where first the styles are loaded and then the content is high-graded later with JavaScript when needed. And we're actually actively working on what our policy is around that as well. But I wouldn't say that there's a risk of like replacing the skins. Maybe I didn't understand the question, but I can follow up if that doesn't answer.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Yaron. Have any of the recommended colors, etc., from the design style guide changed for Codex?
That's a good question. We may have changed a few when we did our accessibility audit. There was specifically one of the things we were looking at is contrast between certain colors. So if you have like a blue link or a red link on top of a certain gray background, for example, there might not have been enough contrast between them to meet the guidelines. So I do think a few colors have changed, but it shouldn't be too drastic.
And then we have one more question from Charlie. You said Codex has a lot of CSS possibilities. Can't we use the CSS classes to do some wiki text styling?
Yes, so that's what I was trying to get at earlier. Is it's not that it's not possible, it's just that the CSS styles in Codex might change. So in order to say like the styles are stable enough for template use, I wouldn't guarantee that, but you're welcome to use them. It's just that the styles might change as the components evolve, and so then that might affect updating templates or uses in wiki text. That's all.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you for having me.